Hey everybody, this is Mike from JinbuPal. We're back again with week 5 with David checking on his progress with the brand new JinbuPal app. So if you haven't seen any of the videos in the series so far, check it out. We'll have a link in the description below, and we'll also put a link up above so you can check out and follow through and see David's progress all the way from week 1. So yeah, let's dive right into it. How's it going, David?
Pretty good. Another week done in quarantine, so
Yep.
sticking to my practice and making progress.
Sounds good.
So let me just jump straight in and share my screen, show everybody what I've been doing. So yeah, another week. I think I missed one day this week, but I hit 200 characters, which is pretty cool.
Awesome.
And you can see my kind of JinbuPal score progress is slowly just kind of increasing, chugging along there. I'm at 60%, which is cool. But yeah, just been trying to do my 7 characters a day.
So how are you feeling with the, reviewing previous ones? I know you said you're up to 200 now. Do you feel like you at least recognize most of those in any sort of reading content, or do you feel like there's a lot you're missing? How's that feeling with the reviewing?
Yeah, so I'm still going through the same motions of, every day I try to do 7 new characters, but I'll often go back and review previous days. I'll just kind of, randomly select other days and make sure that I kind of know characters along there. I've also, in my reading, I've been trying to really, I feel like I've been really living with inside the JinbuPal app primarily, and it's great for tracking, but going out and looking at real content has, I think, what I need to do in order to really start to reinforce a lot of the characters. This week I really did try to implement, I think last week we talked about if there is a character that I'm having trouble remembering, go look at the words that character is a part of.
Yeah.
And so I've been doing that, but also just kind of in real content. Seeing characters in the wild, I think, is helping me to connect dots more.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing I wanted to show you, and I actually haven't showed you this, so this will be as kind of a bit of a surprise. So what I've been working on is JinbuPal is tracking all of our characters, and when I'm out, I often read the New York Times in Mandarin. I can go through step by step and look at characters. And so what I did was I synced up the app and created kind of like a little extension for this. And so let's see if this works.
Oh,
So what it does is it highlights all of the characters that I've logged in the app.
dude.
It's just pretty crazy because I can it really kind of visualizes this is 5 weeks in, and
Yeah,
most of the content on the
right.
page is highlighted.
It's pretty, dude. That is so cool.
Um,
That's amazing.
so I just finished getting this thing working today, but what I plan on doing is using this to I don't know, I feel like it gives me more confidence in going and reading random things just because there's so many characters that I already know. And
Yeah.
earlier on, you showed me I didn't know that you could have the dual, the English side by side. And so I'm definitely going to be using this to, I was having difficulty, I can go through each of the characters and see what they are, and it'll even show me the words, but
Yeah.
I still had some difficulty figuring out exactly what the sentence is saying. And so now having the side by side is going to be awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, at this point, I would think that, this is so cool that you have this where you can visualize with the highlighting. Because at this point, I mean, yeah, it's helpful to start trying. You're trying to piece together what you're reading, but obviously the expectation is, you haven't learned the words yet. You're not going to know what's being stated in here. But you start to pick up on patterns too, especially as you highlight over things. You'll start to realize grammar patterns and also different word patterns and things like that it's all about forming that web that we talked about last week, and it'll just kind of start to come where you recognize more and more. But yeah, this is a huge realization, and I think this is really great for anybody watching to see, because they can see now what from the perspective of how you're seeing this. And this is just 5 weeks in. I mean, it's a pretty big difference from probably what somebody would expect on how much you need to learn just to even be able to begin to do what you're doing now.
Yeah. Other thing is reading real content and being able to see the words that I at least say that I think I know, it's really going to pull out the characters that I don't actually know. And the repetition of if I'm actually reading through this, I'm going to run into a bunch of characters multiple times. And so there's also that kind of self-reinforcement through the process. And so I'm using JinbuPal to track my progress and track the characters that I'm learning, and using it as a guide to show me okay, here are the most frequently used ones, but then I'm taking that and trying to do my practicing outside of it, which I think is going to be beneficial.
I think another thing that I'm not sure if, I don't think you quite touched on this, but I'm just thinking of this as well. Like, you might see, for example, in here that one character of a word, and you're noticing that when you're highlighting it with the join extension, and then you see that one of those characters, but you don't know the other one. But you start seeing that word over and over and over again. Then it'll be kind of the opposite way of the feedback of that will go drive you to be interested in searching for that particular character in JinbuPal, because now you've experienced it enough in context that you're learning it, which is, by the way, is the whole point of this. We need to make the content approachable so that you can start just reading content. And then because there's more context around it, that's when you see words in there that you're interested in learning, and they stick because there was something meaningful behind it. So yeah, I think that'll be, dude, that's really impressive that you'll be able to do it so quick.
Yeah, it's awesome. Going to be cool. Other stuff that I've done this week, I started using, there's an app called, I think it's called Opinion Trainer.
Yeah.
And so I keep saying that I'm really going to dive into tones, but I think that's kind of my first real step at some of the listening piece of it. I do feel a bit intimidated around I feel much more comfortable trying to do reading than listening to content. Yeah. Just because I feel it's going to be so laborious of just pausing every 2 seconds and figuring out what things mean. But I'm using Pinion Tracker to help try to train my ear to recognize different tones.
Yeah.
And so hopefully that will turn into me feeling more confident in.
Well, I wouldn't worry about pausing every 2 seconds and that, because I will do that with stuff because for anybody watching, I'm still working on my listening skills. I still have a lot of trouble with that. And I think that if you're trying to get the exact content that someone's saying, then yeah, it's really helpful to hear something over and over again. Or maybe if you're watching a video, you got to pause it and look at the subtitles because it's a word that you're unfamiliar with. That's kind of a different step. I think, at least what I did at this stage was I would just listen to something and just let it play and just get used to hearing it. But also, I would, without pausing it, I'd hear opinion and tone and try to pick it out in my head and figure out what they were saying. And it's, it all just starts kind of coming together. You start hearing somebody say something and again and again and again. And then you see it in a text, and then one day it clicks and you go, oh, okay, that's what they were saying. So yeah, I mean, that can be really helpful as well. But I wouldn't worry about necessarily pausing it every second.
Gotcha.
Opinion,
Okay, that makes
opinion
more
trainer
sense
is a good way to get going with that as well, because you'll hear them and get used to them.
Yeah.
What was it? There's something else I was going to say about.
Did you have any other tools that you use for tone stuff?
No, I think the only other thing is kind of like I mentioned once before in here, is just typing in a bunch of opinion into my Google Translate, and then I would just play it back. So, for example, I would just do this, and then I would just hear that and try to work through what it was, what the different tones were, and I would just play it back again and again. And that's good to be able to hear the difference between them as well. This isn't another tool, but one other thing that I would say is that definitely I would say the best practice to start right now on is like I totally get it if you're saying, you still are putting off the tones, because I mean they're difficult to get started with. But when you go into an article, just make it this is just your absolute steadfast rule. If you see something in an article and you're trying to read through it and trying to pronounce anything that you recognize, you have to say it with the correct tone. And then when you don't know it, you hover your mouse over it and see what it was correctly, and then reestablish that, or I can't think of the right word. You say it again and make sure, so that especially those really frequent characters, you're going to get to a point where you see them so many times and you said it so many times that you will remember it. So you kind of force that repeated practice in with the studying. And I saw a tip about that a long time ago, and I found that was when I really started learning them, because it's also in the words that you really get used to the pattern of this word just sounds like this, and you can remember that character is in another word, and so I know in that word it sounds like this too. So things like that will kind of also help kind of mesh together in that form, kind of in the network sort of idea that we talked about before. So yeah, I would say that's the biggest thing, and that's the easiest to do, because at least for me, you don't feel like you're like beating your head against the wall, because you're engaging with content while you're doing it rather than looking at a flashcard. And then you can, if you recognize later in the flashcards when you were reviewing them, specifically for the tone or for some other reason, you realize, oh, I actually have this one down, then mark it off in JinbuPal.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. That seems like a good kind of rule to bake in as I start doing this.
Yeah, it's definitely helpful. Cool. Well, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing, how that starts filling up over time. I'd be curious to see, with somebody in week 1 and week 2, seeing the difference, just from, I guess, because you went, I'm trying to remember what benchmarks you were at for the first few weeks, but yeah, that'd be pretty impressive to be able to see that.
Yeah.
Cool.
Sweet. Well, I think that's all I got for this week. I mean, I'm going to keep trucking along and report back next week.
Awesome, man. Sounds legit. Well, we'll talk next week.
All right, man. Talk to you later.
Bye.